Youpi was the youngest of the Royal Guard, and he was the one that struggled the most with understanding Nen combat. Hey, what's up everybody? It's LeeLos, and today we're talking about who's the strongest of the Royal Guard. Stay steady in pursuit of your dreams and goals. You're born to win, you're made for greatness, and I definitely believe in you guys. Keep up the great work each and every day. So, the Royal Guard is a group of some of the most powerful characters in the entire series of Hunter x Hunter. Today we're going to analyze every single power-up and ability these characters have displayed to figure out overall who's the most powerful out of these three monsters. Pouf is often the most underrated out of all of the Royal Guard. He has at least two different Hatsu abilities that are both decently powerful. One ability allows him to make several clones of himself. His clones can be formed into a variety of different sizes, and when he makes the clones smaller, he can make a larger number of them in total, and these clones have been shown to be more or less invincible to physical damage. The only way we've been shown you can defeat these clones is by burning them. The weakness to this ability though is that the original Pouf has to stay at the size of a bumblebee whenever he's using this cloning ability, and he has a second Hatsu ability where he can use his scales to hypnotize people and get a reading on people's overall emotional state. We've also seen he can change his voice and face to imitate other people, and when he was first introduced, he was shown reading Pitou's mind as well. So this was either him just using his scale ability, or maybe he can just read the mind of Pitou and Youpi because they're siblings. Also, there's a line of dialogue when he was talking to Morel that implies that there's a possibility that all of his clones together only add up to about half of his total strength, because he says if he himself is trapped, then his combat potential is cut in half, and then right after that says that his original clones don't add up to the real him. This is something else to keep in mind when people underestimate Pouf's abilities. But overall, Pouf is pretty powerful, especially if you don't know what his abilities are. Youpi was the youngest of the Royal Guard, and he was the one that struggled the most with understanding Nen combat, but throughout his one battle in the palace invasion, Youpi evolves and becomes considerably more powerful, and Pitou is the oldest of the Royal Guard. So now let's talk about the different battle matchups between the three Royal Guards and explain overall who's more likely to be the strongest of these three characters. So Youpi versus Pouf. Overall, Youpi has just simply displayed far more impressive strength feats than anything Pouf ever displays, but it should be noted that Pouf is just genuinely smarter than Youpi, and if Youpi doesn't understand how Pouf's Hatsu abilities work, there's a real possibility Pouf actually would be able to defeat Youpi in a 1v1 fight simply due to outsmarting Youpi. Youpi, if he doesn't know how Pouf's ability works, honestly might get tricked into getting hypnotized and defeated by Pouf by just being outsmarted. That is a possibility, but in terms of overall raw strength, Youpi is depicted to have the better strength feats, and in theory, his Rage Cannon probably would just delete Pouf's clones. Now, Pitou versus Youpi is the most contested debate amongst the Royal Guard, especially Pitou versus Youpi after Youpi evolves. So first off, Pitou objectively has the best statements out of any of the Royal Guard. Pouf states that his N is nothing compared to Pitou's. Meanwhile, we never even see Youpi use N. He might not even know how to do it, and throughout the Chimera Ant arc, there's a real possibility that Pitou was actually getting stronger. So Pitou was born about an entire month before Youpi, and within about a day of killing Kite, Pitou thinks of its first Hatsu ability. Pitou states, "All I need to do is fix him, that's what I'll make my ability," and we see later that Pitou develops a Hatsu ability that heals people. There's one of a few different possibilities. Either Pitou just started with a healing puppet, and over about the 30+ day time frame from this moment until the actual palace invasion, Pitou evolved its Hatsu ability multiple times over, developed multiple more Hatsu abilities on top of it, and then showed up at the palace invasion far stronger than Pitou was when Pitou first developed its ability, or in one instant Pitou thought of like 5 different Hatsu abilities at the same time. I lean towards thinking that Pitou actually was just evolving throughout the entire arc, because it makes narrative sense that Pitou was evolving at the same time that Gon and Killua were going through a training arc, and there's a few pieces of dialogue that imply this anyway, such as when Pitou's healing Komugi, the narrator states that with experience, Pitou was getting even better at healing. That combined with Pitou just being a natural genius anyway, makes narrative sense that Pitou was improving throughout the entirety of the Chimera Ant arc, but it's up for debate. So let me know what you guys think is more likely. Do you think Pitou in this one instance actually thought of like the 5 different Hatsu abilities that Pitou displays, or did Pitou just start with a healing puppet and evolve over the course of the month plus of time? Then when Youpi is born, in the manga, they actually show that Pitou's controlling kite in the background. If Pitou was actually evolving the entire Chimera Ant arc, then that would mean Pitou started with the healing ability. During the month time frame before Youpi was born, Pitou began controlling kite as a puppet and was controlling kite with a remote Hatsu, an ability that stays active at long range and has multiple different levels to it, where kite gets increasingly stronger. Then Pitou learned to control 500 different remote puppets at the same time. Then Pitou learned it can enhance itself with its own puppet, and that's when Pitou creates Tepsakura that enhances its own abilities. Then in the Chimera Ant arc, we see that Pitou not only uses Tepsakura to fight at 100%, Pitou, when fighting Adult Gon, goes beyond its limits with Tepsakura. So using Tepsakura goes beyond its own limitations. You could argue there's also a narrative element comparing Pitou to Gon and Killua, because as Gon and Killua are struggling to just maintain Ren for 3 hours, we see Pitou is effortlessly maintaining En, something more challenging than Ren, and maintaining it for days on end. So as Gon and Killua are working really hard to improve themselves and train and evolve, Pitou is just effortlessly improving at a way faster rate than both Gon and Killua are. Now, on top of all of this, Pitou is just actually word for word stated to be the strongest of the Royal Guard. Illumi states that Pitou was the strongest of the Royal Guard, so the question becomes, where did this information come from? Like, how would Illumi know that if he wasn't on the mission? We see that Morel is the one who reports the information of the Chimera Ant arc to the officials at the end of the arc, but Morel never saw Pitou, but he did feel Pitou's En. There's a few different ways you could argue this. You could argue that Morel, just from feeling Pitou's En, knew that Pitou was the strongest of the 3, and that's why it was reported that Pitou was the strongest. Another thing you could say is maybe Knuckle gave that information to Morel, because Knuckle actually did see all 3 of the Royal Guard. So a medium ball interpretation of this statement would be assuming that all of the information was relayed by Killua, meaning from Killua's perspective, the power Pitou displayed without even using its battle Hatsu, Tepsakura, was already stronger than anything he saw Youpi display while Youpi was fighting and getting angry. Then when Pitou uses Tepsakura, Pitou would then become considerably stronger than Youpi, especially when using Tepsakura to dance beyond its limits. So just using this medium ball interpretation, you already have a strong argument for Pitou being stronger to even the evolved Youpi. The highball interpretation would be assuming that this information was all relayed by Knuckle, because Knuckle saw the evolved version of Youpi as well. That would mean the power that Pitou displayed without using its battle Hatsu Tepsakura would be stronger than even the evolved version of Youpi. Then when using Tepsakura, Pitou would become considerably stronger than even the evolved version of Youpi. Finally, the lowest lowball interpretation you could use is to say that this statement is based off of Killua seeing postmortem Nen Pitou, and then that would mean postmortem Nen Pitou is stronger than Youpi. But considering that Pitou not only has the best statements of the 3 Royal Guard, but is also the oldest Royal Guard and had the longest amount of time with a Hatsu ability, I would argue that overall, it is more likely that Pitou is stronger than Youpi overall, even if you include the evolved version. If you're talking about overall combat ability, number 1 would be Pitou, number 2 would be Youpi, number 3 would be Pouf. But debatably, in a Nen battle, Pouf might be slightly more likely to defeat Youpi simply by outsmarting him, but overall, Pitou is just the overall strongest of the Royal Guard. Normal Pitou is the number 1 strongest, even stronger than the evolved version of Youpi, and then postmortem Nen Pitou is even stronger than the normal Pitou. And Pouf himself admits that Pitou's just better at En than Pouf is. Using En, Pitou might be able to sense where Pouf's original body is instantly. Pitou and Pouf at the very lowest are relative, and then Pitou can amp itself to even higher levels with its Hatsu ability. The odds of Pouf tricking Pitou are very low, because Pitou's not a novice at Nen combat like Youpi. So yeah, I just lean towards Pitou being the overall strongest of the Royal Guard. That's everything I wanted to say. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate the views in the comments. Like and subscribe, and I'll see ya on the next one.